Right, what I thought we could do is obviously at some point we need to talk about team spirit, not
That's
least
right.
because a no-name team, effectively in terms of elites and favourites, like put it this way, I wonder how many people actually were ever bet on this team to win Katowice. I bet you got amazing odds. I bet it'll be like 25-1 or 50-1 or something. So, like, if a team like that wins a tournament, obviously we have to address it. Like, they are essentially the revelation of Counter-Strike. But here's what I want to do differently, though, Maniac. Everyone on broadcast, on Twitter, on every show I've been watching, has done the donk segment where they just do like a 20-minute segment where they basically wax lyrical about how brilliant. Now, here's the good news. One, he's so good, guys, that we've all done that already, all of us collectively. Maniac did it on broadcast quite a lot. Then secondly, luckily he is the guy. Like, he's going to do it at a future tournament, so we're going to have plenty of time to do that. So I thought in our particular case, I think it would be cool if we just talk about team spirit as a team, though, mate. That's the angle I wanted to do, because I feel like the saddest thing about the event, I totally understand why I was part of doing this, is because in terms of like both what you saw on the screen, the scale of winning such a great accomplishment early on, and the stats, it's understandable why donk was the ultimate distraction in this scenario. It makes perfect sense. Everyone was like, in this analogy, like, our attention couldn't escape the event horizon of Donk's performance. You couldn't, yeah. I mean, the joke is, part of me even did you start thinking, like, what I've only ever thought about Prime, Simple and Zero, which is, why is the cameraman not on this guy at the beginning of every round? Do you know what I mean? Like, I would get pissed, Maniac, when he would do the 3K, but I missed the first two. Because I'm like, bro, listen, I know it doesn't make sense, but I knew these kills were coming. You know, when you get that feeling, it's like, why would you ever switch? You know, even though you're right, like, Observer, like in the normal meta, you're right. The CT covering door on Nuke, CT side, probably is the guy who's going to get the first kill. I don't care. Donk's on the other side of that door, mate. Go to him quickly. He's going to get the kill. So the problem I feel like is this. There wasn't time to talk about everything else. And bro, I'm not joking. Every other member of this team and the team as a whole needs to be talked about, mate. Like, this was not. Here's what's crazy. It was by definition, statistically, the most dominant performance ever, of course. But what's bizarre is, actually, it is the case that most of the other ones you think of, like Prime, Simple, Prime, they usually were when they were the one-man carry. And actually the joke is, like, Simple sometimes even lost. So did Zero when they did those performances. What the crazy thing here is, I've never seen this before. Someone did what looks on paper like a one-man carry if you only look at their stats. But then you look at the rest of the stats. This is why, by the way, you'll notice, Maniac, one angle I never do. I'm very much against this, but I'll let other people have their own take, is I don't believe that shit of like, well, you can't blame the third player because all the frags were gone because of Shiro and Axats. Like, do you know maths, guys? Like, 5 times, like, it used to be 16. Like, there's so many more frags than You're talking like there's 40 frags in a game, guys, and a guy drops 20, so there's nothing left. Like, there's always enough frags. Like, that's just not the case. And I think this team proves that, by the way, because Donk had, like, the most insane stats ever. By the way, Shiro and Zontic's absolutely fine, carving out their own, like, fucking mini MVP numbers. So I think if you look at the rest of the team, look, I want to make it clear at the beginning, we could literally just make this about Donk. He was that good. But I also want to, let's give the props to everyone. Let's give everyone their flowers. So, Maniac, the first thing I want to ask you is this. I know it sounds mad, but I actually feel like Shiro just had the most invisible op. Like, I can't remember what I think his rating was at 1.25 or something mental for the event, Maniac. He had the quietest 1.25 op performance I've ever seen. Because, you know, I saw someone on Twitter say that if you're Shiro, you're never going to get to win the MVP because of Donk, right? And so I gave that analogy that I used to say the same thing happened to Fur with Cold Zero. Because of Cold Zero's style, he'd always win. But I said, here's the difference. I used to feel sorry for Fur because he was taking all the chances. In Shiro's case, if you are the passive AWPer and somehow the aggressive rifle outperforms you, I have to just say, I think that's sort of the way it should be, if you know what I mean. Like, if he's doing all the, because give me that take, give me some thoughts on Shiro's obviously back, by the way. I've noticed people didn't mention that. Like, dude, he's back. He's fucking sick. He's still really great. He's won a massive tournament. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So the thought that I have was that for Shiro, his position within Spirit right now is a dream come true for multiple reasons. First of all, I don't think Shiro, just by the pure nature of his playstyle, I don't think he wants to be the guy that is going to go out there and just open up rounds and take incredible risks. Like, this wasn't the vein in which we have discovered him in Counter-Strike. Like, he was immediately with Gambit youngsters, then into Gambit, then into Cloud9, a very strong finisher, like end round, clutch situations, very strong defensive punish with the AWP. Whenever he had people come into his crosshair, covering his teammates that were trying to get traded, he would sort of step in and trade. That's exactly what he needs to do right now in Spirit. Like, the equation between what he wants to do and what's needed from him is almost like the correlation is almost 1.0. Like, it's beautiful. What he needs to do in Spirit in order to win and what he wants to do in Counter-Strike is almost 1-to-1. So as a result, yeah, there's going to be games where he doesn't really see too many people. Like if the first line of offense is being successful, there's going to be situations where he just won't see a lot of people. And you know how Counter-Strike is being played at the highest level now. If you have a 2-for-1 trade into a bomb site, it's trading to save. We're not 6 years ago where people were retrying 3v4s all the time and you would get massive kills. If the first line of offense is successful, you won't get to see a whole lot of people. Turns out Donk opens up 50% of the rounds. So let's put it this way in the offense, right? But I think what he did that I appreciated within the run of Spirit is that here and there, very sporadically, there were moments where halves were on a knife's edge. There were a few moments where there's a clutch that needs to be won. If it isn't, it's going to change the course of the game. It's going to reset financially. It's going to change the meta in terms of like what strategies are available or not. And more often than not, he won them. Like whenever he had to, he won them. For example, the second map of the grand final versus FaZe is it's the perfect example to use here. You can look at the final numbers of the final, and it will tell you a very clear story. That Donk had an incredible final, 1.93 rating. Just shut up at this point. It's just out of this world. But if you did not talk about Shiro and Mirage, then you miss an important part of the story, because there are more than one time where he clutches at the end round. He's got the opening kill around 24 with the scout. He's got closing kills with AWP in post-plan situations. Like, this is where he needs to be his best Shiro, which is a super safe pair of hands, not panicking, and making sure that whatever advantage Spirit is being put in, that's going to turn into a round. That is going to be closed immediately. You give him a 3v2 on bomb side, the opponent is trying to retake it, that's it. He's closing it for you. So as far as I'm concerned, his numbers are reasonable, although I think he qualified for an EVP, so it's already really good. But like, his mission is fulfilled. Like, that's what in the context of Spirit, he did what was needed of him in order to win.
Yes.
And and what's going to be very interesting in the future of Spirit is if, and again I have to use if, here's a conditional, if one day Donk does not provide that kind of incredible performance within the system, which I think we should talk about the system as well. That's going to be probably the next topic. If Donk doesn't provide that, would Shiro be capable of going beyond what he's doing here? Put a bit more skin in the game, get a bit more stuck in some of these situations, and make the difference. That would be the next level. But within this ecosystem of Spirit in Katowice, as far as I'm concerned, it's a A+ performance from Shiro. He did what was needed from him.
Because I would say this. Actually, let's talk about like the overall approach Spirit had, right? If people don't know, you notice I almost never ever talk about the player Chopper, right? I know, here's the problem. I get the sense a lot of people love this guy because they're on that thing of like, I like him as a person, or he seems like a cuddly teddy bear, or you know, or like the thing with Major where they just know you've been around years and years and you've been struggling, but you haven't had the success, and you know, and then you get the breakthrough finally. I get that angle. By the way, I am human. I do understand why people cry when they qualify for the majors. I just think personally, like, I don't really care that some Portuguese team's going to get banged out in the first round of the Swiss Maniac. You know the way I am, mate. I can't make myself care about shit I don't care about. Like, I'm like, listen, if I was at home and I had tissues and chocolates and I was fucking, you know, it's a Sunday night and it's raining, maybe then I'd get all emotional. But when I'm watching the tournament, I'm not like that, mate. You know I am. I like, skip this, get to the next one. Like, I'd obviously rather have fucking even an IP there for the lulz, wouldn't I? Like, I don't give a fuck. Give me the narratives and the stories. But what I will say is this: I do feel like people really misunderstood. Like, dude, I think something's changed about this guy. Because remember, the original Chopper was the guy from Vega Squadron, right? Guys, Vega Squadron, I used to think, the joke is I call Virtus Pro now anti-CS. That was like anti-CS on the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, they used to just literally just rush and just have SMGs and stupid CZs. And essentially, it was like 5 JWs just playing you every round, just like swarming you all the time. And then the joke was, hence why famously FaZe Clan did lose that BO1 at that major. The joke was, it's like, they're not going to win often doing that, but if they hit you that one time and the right players are hitting, like Amir or something, then yeah, they could just knock out in a BO1 seemingly any team. But they were also the ultimate team that after that, there wasn't much more than that. So unless they had people just essentially going for like the crazy haymaker to knock you out, that was all they had. They weren't actually a top team. I'd even say the analogy is a bit like Space Soldiers. Space Soldiers were the same thing. They could upset you in a BO1 on Cobblestone, but if you put them in a series, you could bet like any normal team with normal meta CS would win the series, right? My problem is this: if Chopper did that in past teams, because I did think that Spirit that had like Dexter, for example, that made that like semi-run at PGL. They were like a solid team, but they didn't actually look that great tactically to me. And I thought actually some of the players looked a bit lost sometimes. This team looks night and day compared to that, mate. Like this team actually, I think, I was talking about this before we came on because it's a point I've been making on my other shows, but I think even the way they use Donk, mate, is so shrewd. I've never seen this from a rookie. Like this is like, the joke is, it's like they really do know. It's like they must have a crystal ball. It's almost like Maniac. They looked in the crystal ball and they saw Donk lifting up like #1 player in 2024. And they were like, oh shit, wait a minute. If he actually ends up being the best, why don't we just from day one build the team to give him all the resources to be that #1? And it's like you're like in some loop of which one was first. Because in this scenario, they actually played at this tournament, guys, as if he already is Prime Simple, except on a rifle. So I guess Prime Nico or something here. Because he didn't just, here's the problem. It is true. You can't actually underestimate the totality of, like, when you see those stats, the reason why those stats defy all Counter-Strike history is 1, he is not ever using an AWP, 2, he is an entry player, and 3, he actually does just take duels all the time. But even with that context said, if someone was going to do all those things, here's what I would do to make their job amazing. I'd give them loads of flash assists. Even though you like to take duels, I'd even tell you, brother, this is the duel where the AWPer's on an off angle around the corner. Let me, Chopper or Magic, we're going to jump around the corner. Then you trade him. Like, they do that clearly as well. And then also, by the way, if at the end of the round, after all the damage he's done, he's also got Shiro to close around, like you say. Like, actually, he's got, and by the way, I haven't even mentioned Zontix yet, and Zontix frags like 1.16 rating in the tournament. So you can actually see, like, for a tournament setup, like, what an amazing setup. And by the way, last thing I'll mention is, a lot of people didn't notice this. The reason my Magix ends up looking like a Boomich type character on an SMG half the time is because, as far as I can tell, he's the guy who just takes the economic hit to make sure Donk always has the gun, or Shiro has his AWP or whatever. So again, from 1 to 5, everyone's doing their job in this team. To, like, if we're talking about that task thing earlier, everyone in this team, Maniac, knows their task is, if Donk's the best player in the world, we're going to win the tournament, right? It feels like it.
I agree with you. I really think from a structural standpoint, it was close to perfection.
It's amazing, wasn't it?
Like the roles and how the rounds are built and how the strats are executed. I really think they were close to perfection in all of these aspects, which leads me to think that even if Donk was to take like a 10 or 20% downgrade, because at some point he's going to have to come back to Earth anyway, I would still believe that Spirit would be a very strong contenders for deep playoffs anyway, because there were so many different elements that came together in Katowice that lead me to think that, wait a minute, there's no reason to think all of them would go away immediately.
Yes.
That's not the case. And so the first thing I would like to mention first is like the quality of the executes and the utilities used. It's not, how can I put it? It's not superficial. It's not just for fun. Like, every util they use is very well thought out and very well timed. You can follow, like we did that a couple of times in Katowice, where we made breakdowns of rounds, and you can see, of course, as you mentioned, Donk is being set up. I mean, there's going to be 2 Molotovs being put for key positions of the first line for the CT. There's going to be 3 flashes at the same time he peaks. Of course, all of that is true, and then he's going to do the job. But like, the timing of the execute, the pathway that he's got as he's opening the site is immaculate. It's right on the money. And so, first of all, A+ for like execution of strategies, because how many times do you see teams have like sort of janky strats and the timings of the util is not that great, and so someone ends up peaking when the Molotov is already extinguished? That doesn't really make sense. They executed that very properly. Then I would also like to give a shout out to Chopper for the decisions that he made as a leader, because I feel like he's been able in this Spirit team to, whenever necessary and whenever it was adequate, tap into his inner Vega squadron and just hit you with the simplicity of a contact play or an execute that's at 1.30 seconds or whatever the hell. He would do that because I do believe it's necessary in today's Counter-Strike in order to win. You can look at all of the teams that have lifted trophies recently, G2, Vitality, FaZe, they all do it. Nobody plays 12 rounds of map control. That doesn't exist anymore. You can never win like that. So whenever he needed to, I think he was very good at calling the right strategies, but also mid-round tempo and late-round decision-making for rotations and all, really on point. Good reads. And then it felt like they didn't have pressure. And I know it's a blanket statement, but what I mean by that, it didn't feel like they were running after the game and trying to, oh no, we made the wrong gamble, quick, let's
put
really
it this
go back
way.
to the other side.
I will say, Maniac, one thing you're pointing out here that I also noticed was, I actually kept thinking FaZe was going to come back in this final, because sometimes FaZe could get the early kills in a round, or FaZe wouldn't even be up a man. But you're right, the re-engage or the rotation to come back, the amount of time Spirit then won the round after that was insane. I've never seen that.
Yes, definitely. They have a bit of a VP-esque vibe to them, which is, hey, listen, we're not going to win on all scenarios, but these are the scenarios that we're going to win. If they try to hit A side, if they split A side, we're going to win. If they go B, we're going to save. And they seem very quiet and very able to do that. So that's just to give some praises to Chopper, and I'm sure the coaching staff has something to do with this and how they build the strategy. I'm probably missing some people to give flowers to on that one, but I wanted to give a props to the game plan in general. And then, of course, like the individuals like surrounding, like Zontix is an incredible anchor. Like he really is strong, as in odds-defying strong for the character. And then he's never going to get a whole lot of sunlight. When you're playing with Donk and Shiro, your name might just be forgotten in the history books of Counter-Strike. But if you really look at his ability when he's in a dumpster fire of a situation with people all around him, his ability to grab 2 instead of 1, or to grab 3 instead of 2, or to stay alive 3 extra seconds before he dies, that's really elite level. And for a very young character as well, I think he's 19? I'm pretty sure he's not even 20.
He's very young, yes.
He's very young. So for this profile, this character to already be doing such a good job. And what's kind of interesting as well, if you really look into the details of Spirit's playstyle, is that they have an interesting versatility of how they use players. Like Zontix will play some anchor position, like pure anchor position. Let's say on Anubis, he'll play on the A side, but then he'll play short on Mirage. So it's like they can permutate a little bit. Like this guy can be a bit more aggressive on the map than Magisk is going to feel here, because Magisk is a very good glue. And I know this doesn't sound very sexy as a term, but I do think it's extremely necessary for any team to win, to have someone that can just hop.
Yes.
Like just pluck any hole. Where do you want me to play? You want me to play on B side Mirage? Yeah, absolutely.
I actually do call that role, like from Daughter and more. I call it the Phil. It's like I used to say NBK was the French scene's Phil. He would just do whatever you need.
Exactly. And Magix does that, and not only does he do it, but also you were right, he does it with whatever weapon, which means financially speaking, that also balances the resources necessary. He's going to play with a shotgun, he's going to play with an MP9, doesn't matter, he'll do it anyway, dualies, you name it. So what that means is that he frees up a whole lot of resources that can be, you guess, either invested in an AWP for Shiro or in a rifle for Donk, because why the hell would you not? This sounds like common sense to sort of Artem. So this is why I really... Obviously, as you said, when we were at the desk in Katowice, we could not talk about Donk. Like, we were witnessing history. It was impossible not to address the otherworldly nature of what we were looking at. But at the same time, I really tried to talk about how there is a balance between individual brilliance, but just an overall system that seems to be working for Spirit. And that gives me hope that it's going to happen again. And thinking about this going to show up at the RMR in 24 hours now, we'll see.
Yeah, actually, on the Zontix angle, I have a bit to talk about there. I actually feel like the joke is, right, it's bad enough if you're Shiro, and like I say, you actually did have the stats that would be the MVP of a normal tournament, but you weren't even in the conversation because of Donk. And then, if you think that's bad, though, like, if he only got a drip of attention, there was nothing. It evaporated by the time we got to Zontix. Like, because I agree with you, mate. First of all, I don't think people realise. I think at the end of the tournament, Zontix had a 1.16 rating. It's also his first Katowice, guys. Like, I looked this up because he's not only young, he's also mega inexperienced, mate. I looked this up on, if you go on to, like, Wikipedia, he's played 5 LANs ever on there, and one of those was Blast Groups, by the way. One was Boom Dakar, which was that recent one, and one was that, like, Dunav party that was just CIS teams. That's it. And then the one, like, was in 2021, which was a Ukrainian championship. So, like, basically, he's played Blast and then now this Katowice. Just the groups of Blast. That's it of Tier 1 CS. Like, BetBoom had the teams, but obviously no one ticks the tournament that Series C. And also, it was just a kind of weird tournament in terms of results. So, this guy's mega inexperienced. But I'll tell you what, Maniac, here's the crazy thing. Normally, if I just looked at the stats page, this is the most obvious player to go, well, there's no way that number could maintain. Because, like, yeah, probably the rating number's too high. But as you say, if you just look at what he does in the game, mate, I actually think this looks reliable. This player actually looks like his floor is very impressive. Like, I was even getting a vibe immediately of, like, this is almost like a Ukrainian Crims or something. Because, dude, the two things he is unbelievable at, like you say, is one, if you just make him like an anchor, or basically if he's alive at the end of a round, it is ridiculous how many times this guy would fight 2 people and get the second kill. Like, I would see him get the first one, and like a normal player, you go, right, we'd probably get straight. No, he'd just then get 2, and you'd be like, he's getting too much. And then also, on the other side, if he's on T side, does this guy ever miss a trade? Like, if you go in and if someone he gets the trade every time, it feels like. That's why I say it reminds me of like a Crimson. You're doing all the like shitty heavy lifting. You're not a total support player, but you're doing like pretty hard work. And so in that scenario, it's a bit like I always say about Magisk. The number doesn't really relate to how good you are, because it's relative to your role. Like, this guy's fucking amazing in this role, mate. So again, if I think about this, right, the Donk guy, if you look at his style, obviously I don't know if the numbers can maintain, but his style definitely is replicable. He looks really fucking good. Shiro, by the way, probably one of the most reliable players ever, as long as he doesn't get nerves. And then this guy, mate, if you really have these 3 players, this isn't a flash in the pan. Like, this team can do this more. Like, I'm not going to, obviously, like you say, especially when someone does the numbers donked in, you have to, like, take a little pause and shade in the possibility, you know, they're like the third best team in the world, but pretty soon, they're definitely legit. This squad is fucking legit. Like, I'm with you, mate, the Zontix guy. This is the real revelation. Like, I knew the donk guy could be good. I had no clue some fucking rando guy I've never heard of who's played at, you know, like 4 lands before that is going to come and do this. Like, this is monster stuff. How often do your third best player do that? Not very often, even in big teams, right?
It's a super underrated topic, of course, like Zontix angle. But what really is for me fascinating from like a human standpoint right now is now that Katowice happened and they had.
Oh, and by the way, that line he also said, I would normally make fun of that. You know, where you go, I don't care if anyone cares who I am. If I win 10 championships, well, then you immediately won a championship. You know what? Fair play. I would have normally said, because I would say, yeah, but what then if you don't win then? What if you come second? Like, but since you did win, you win that one, mate. I can't lie. You okay? Well done. Great line.
He had a few good lines for the interview.
Yes. Okay. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say, like, what is really fascinating right now is now that the storm has passed and they won Katowice and all of this has materialized, can they maintain this candid attitude towards the game? And by they, I mainly mean Donk and Zontix, right? Because Magix and Chopper, they've been around for a while. Shiro knows all about it, the ups and the downs, mostly the downs at the very highest level. But I'm just wondering, there was such a light-heartedness to Donk playing Counter-Strike, you know, as in he doesn't perceive how important what he is doing is. Like, I am perceiving that. I'm watching him play, and I can already imagine all of the consequences and the ramifications of what he's doing right now. It doesn't feel like he perceives it. He is it's to a certain degree oblivious.
Okay.
He's relatively oblivious to how extraordinary what he did is.
So the analogy is, you think essentially he's like, you know, when Wile E. Coyote chases the roadrunner off a cliff, but it's only when he looks down that he realizes he's off a cliff. So to you, Donk's like, run off the cliff, but the key thing is he hasn't realized yet he's off the cliff. So he's just running still.
He just goes on, right?
Okay.
So I just wonder, is there going to be a moment, because I absolutely loved his attitude, and he was so genuine when he was answering this, and he was just like, oh, you know, I just love to play the game and I have such a good time and I love my team. And I'm like, bro, like I love all that you're saying right now, but how are you going to deal with this realization that, wait a minute, I might actually be the best player in the world right now. We're the best team in the world right now. We're going to the major. Oh my God, we might win the major. Can you imagine?
Oh, there's pressure to win the major now, mate. Like, for real. Yeah.
Once these thoughts sort of kind of enter your mind, and you become aware of it. Our job on broadcast is to create narratives and drama and implications of what's happening. Oh, what are we witnessing right now? As a player, you would want to shield Donk from that forever and ever. Just like put him in like a sensory deprivation room and just like, listen, just play Counter-Strike. Like, don't listen to any podcast, don't do any interview, don't go on HLTV, don't worry about it. Just do what you do. But it's not going to happen. To a degree, it's going to find its way to his mind, right? And I'm just unsure how they as a team and he as a player will deal with this realization that, oh, wait a minute, like maybe we just gonna win everything. We can win everything. Maybe I'm the best in the world. Maybe I'm the greatest prodigy ever to touch the game, right? So that's what I'm gonna observe in the next few events is like, is anything changing from this? Because usually there's supposed to be a ramp up for players, right? Think about Simple, think about Zaiwu. There was always a ramp up to the point where you win an S tier elite event and you get your MVP and all. But here, there was almost no ramp up. It was just like 0 to 100. Like, that's it. Oh, one Katowice, I have an MVP, and I destroyed the individual's record of rating at an event on day one. It's like, holy hell, how do you deal with that then? That I'm not sure. That's sort of my question.
Oh, I know what you mean. Like, put it this way, it actually is. I would even characterize it similar to you. It's not even that I want it to be the case. It's like I'm sort of scared it is. Like, essentially, if this is the one guy ever, can he really defy fate forever? Like, everyone has a bad match. Everyone has a bad fight. Everyone has a match when the nerves get to them. Like, the funny thing is, what you're talking about earlier with, like, players like a Simple, etc., who obviously the obvious best analogues because they were super prodigies. What actually usually happens is exactly what you're talking about. It's not really, by the way, that, like, the opponent was better. You know what, some of these guys have had upsets earlier in tournament. Like, remember, Simple was, like, running them to the Cologne final, guys, with fucking Team Liquid. Like, he's already beaten the best teams in the world. It's not really that SK was unbeatable. I think what happens is this. this. When you're in the midst of the run, like the Roadrunner phenomenon we're talking about, like you're just in the middle of it, you're just fragging out, it's working, it's happening, you can't believe it, but you know what, you're in the game, you're immersed. The problem is when you have that time to think about it after the match, and then you are going like into a final, for example, and suddenly now you're thinking about things you never were thinking about before, like, hey, maybe we're the favourite here, maybe we can win. Wait a minute, if I play well, I can win the tournament, but what if I don't play? And all those thoughts, those intrusive thoughts come in, right? The problem is, those happen to everyone. So I have to say, the real joke goes like this. Either, definitely, Donk will have one tournament where he has a big drop-off, probably soon, or the real joke is, what actually makes him exceptional isn't even the impossible mechanics. It'll be that apparently he's the only player ever to have no nerves in any context. Like, that would even be more transcendent, in my opinion, than the skills, which look bonkers as they are, because I've never seen that ever, mate. So, like, I've seen the greatest players of all time, they all get right. All of them have the times when it gets to them, or the joke is sometimes it's not even external fights. Sometimes you can just get in your own head. Like, I can tell you straight up from knowing Simple over the years, some of his absolute worst finals are ones where actually he went in with actually the mindset probably a fan would want him to have of like, I've got to 1v9 this whole thing and be the best player in the world. And I'll tell you what, that's what destroyed him, because then he did stuff like went for pushes he shouldn't, or like forced on a round where he should normally sit, because essentially he couldn't trust the game. He couldn't trust that his team could do anything. And he himself put the pressure on himself. It wasn't even reading fan comments. It's just thinking myself, like, if I don't win, sort of, it's my fault. Like, that's not the great way to think. Like, Donk so far, somehow, I agree with you. It's not even, you notice again, it's like the Immer thing. It's not that he then comes out and goes, yeah, well, I am the best player ever, actually. And basically, why would I be scared? I was shitting on Rops and Carrigan on practice. No. He actually talks like he is just a kid who's just like, I can't believe I actually am here. This is great. Like, I'm doing my best. I'm playing well. And what do you know? I've won the tournament. But I agree with you. Part of me is just like, wait a minute. This almost sounds like it hasn't actually hit him yet. Like, he hasn't realised yet that he hasn't just gone to LAN and played well. He's just won like a tournament that like Carrigan and Nico spent like 10 years trying to win. You know what I mean? Like, and in one tournament, we're now saying you might actually end up being the GOAT. Like, that is a lot of pressure. So if it ever pierces that veil, I know what you mean. I'm a little bit concerned. Like, I luckily, like Simple at his prime, you do think to yourself, maybe these can just be the aliens that defy like all rules.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But I'll just say human nature and history tells me eventually he's going to have a dip.
Of course,
you know, he's gonna have to. Come on,
you're right, and then this is gonna be the moment where we get to discover about what he's made of and what the team is.
Oh, and by the way, don't worry, HLTV.org. They won't just be like, wow, Donk. They will actually, the thread will be like, Donk fans come here, he is washed. Like, listen, in that way, they'll be on brand in that regard, because they'll definitely do that. Like, the haters will just claim like it was a one tournament fluke and he's washed now. You know, of course.
Bro, it's like it's such a complicated position to be in, because I value time and consistency over time really, really highly when I rate players. That's one of the reasons why I never entered ZywOo in the GOAT conversation quite yet, because I really wanted time, years and years to pass. But the problem is the magnitude of Donk's performance in Katowice is so high that I feel like it's not even genuine to play it cool because it's one event. It's disingenuous. Like, you cannot actually just think that, wait a minute, this was just one event. If you actually paid attention to what was happening, you cannot. And some people were really mad at me because I made this tweet where I said 3 names I've changed the game from the moment they started playing.
Oh, right.
Simple, ZywOo, and Donk. Yes. Some people were mad at me and they said, what the fuck? What about Nico? What about Manesi? What about Get Right? What about Device? And I meant it. It was a very first degree tweet, which I felt like these are players where from the first moment I watched them play, you think, holy shit, something's going on.
Yes.
Like, something unreal is going on. Completely out of this world. And well, maybe for Simple, it was a little bit different because I was playing against him at the time. So I didn't have the distance. I was just getting wrecked. But I had the same feeling with ZywOo when he came up in AAA and the first games in Vitality. And I had the same feeling with Donk, which is like, what is going on? What is this guy doing? Well, yeah, I don't know. From this moment on, I guess I just have to be patient. It's like there's a great movie that just came out and I just have to wait for them to produce more movies. And in the meantime, I just have to twiddle my thumb and wait for him to play again Counter-Strike.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.